Welcome to part 18 of fixing up this 1968 Jaguar. I'm not planning on doing much work on this part of the series, mainly because it's December. A lot of parts stores are going to be shut down. I'm going to put the blame onto that. In reality, I'm actually quite broke, and so progress has pretty much stalled on this car since the last time we worked on it with the interior stuff. Interior stuff is still going through. I got to do seats for it. And anyway, I thought this would probably be a good time to actually talk more about the car than actually do any work onto it, because I actually bought this car on the 20th of December in last year, so 2021. That's when I actually bought it from this junkyard for about $1,600. I believe in the first episode I said, you know, I bought this car at a junkyard and that was it. I don't think I've actually gone into the history or the prominence of this car or my background with working on these cars or anything like that. So I think being 1 year into ownership, and you know, probably a good time to look back and check out what we've done. You know, it's a sort of retrospective for 1 year worth of work. I know the car doesn't look like we've done 1 year worth of work, but believe it or not, this is a whole year now. You know, definitely the longest project I've ever done on a car. You see, other cars that I've owned, I've had a 79 Regal, an 80 Chrysler that you see in the background sometimes. Got a Phoenix, got a Kingswood. All those cars have done like Dutchman panels, windscreen channel seals, quarter panels, door skins, chassis repair. I mean, you name it, I've done it on other cars. So this car, rust-wise, yes, definitely the worst car I've ever owned. and for sure, the longest non-running car I've owned before I got it running, out of every car I've owned. I think every other car sort of just came around pretty quick or was running when I got it. At the time, so I wasn't really looking for a project when I first found this car. I was going to do an oil change on my motorcycle. I have a 980 TF 185 Suzuki that I drive around, 2-stroke, 40-year-old motorcycle. I just wanted to do an oil change. So the cool thing about those motorcycles is the gearbox uses automatic transmission fluid. So I was just going to the parts store to get automatic transmission fluid, and right next to the parts store is a wrecking yard where they have whole cars for sale, and this just hit the lot the day before I went. And so seeing over the fence and seeing this car for the first time, this gigantic beautiful 420G just sitting there, was just like, what? How is this here? Who put this here? And there's no real good reason for that. You know, I talked to the lady behind the counter who was working that day, and she said that they bought it at an auction themselves, like a deceased estate auction, and it was just being on-sold. You know, like they bought it to flip it. You know, and they had the price tag on the window. I believe it was $2,550, and it was pretty rough for that cash. I was like, no, oh god, that's a lot of cash. But I kept thinking about the car as soon as I left it. You know, the triple carbs, the classic engine, the first real production sedan with independent rear suspension, and as a result, all four wheels had fully independent suspension. And you know, it just like sparked my imagination. And you know, after a while of debating myself and debating with my Discord buddies, you know, they said, don't do it, do not do that. I was like, it's too sexy. I went for it, and they actually took my $1,600 offer, which I kept begging them for, and I guess eventually they just wanted me, they just, you know, were like, okay, just take the car, stop calling us. And free metro delivery, so that was $1,600 in my backyard. Couldn't get much better than that. So when I got the car home, I was sort of debating, you know, what was the history? I was finding out, what is the history behind this car? What sort of person auctioned this off? Well, the auction sticker, the original MGS auction sticker was still on the car. It's like lot 130 or something like that at one of their just past auctions, and it was for this car. It didn't publish the price that they paid. They would have paid nothing for it, but it was a deceased estate auction, and it came from rural Australia in Uganda, and it was just a country car, you know. And the strangest thing is that we, as a family, you know, we used to go camping a lot, and we'd actually pass through Uganda, and seeing where the auction was being held, I found out that I've actually seen the house where this car had come from. This was like parked around the back with like a huge shed down the back. So I've always known about this car. I've not always known about this car, but I've always seen the property that this car was actually on. And the entire time we were passing there, this car would have been sitting around the back. It was last registered in 1996, September sometime 1996, according to the last registration plates, for a Jaguar black sedan, which this certainly is. And yeah, I mean, the guy who owned it just passed on, and that's it. I found a few choice clues when I was first clearing out this car of the former owner's stuff, and it was stuff like there was a broken set of Playboy sunglasses in the glove box. There was newspapers from 2004. There was a wet t-shirt contest 1995 bumper sticker from Mount Mary Hotel, which was a seedy bar back in the day, you know, titty bar. So this car really, you know, had a colourful owner. Lots of fags in the car too, like cigarettes just everywhere. So I believe that the car is, you know, comes from that sort of guy, and I believe that the guy who bought the car, I think he was just using it until it was really, you know, on its last legs. Because I believe that the owner of the car had a European car in rural Australia, and that didn't bode well for ever getting spares or replacement for this car. So whatever broke or wore out on this car, he just had to keep repairing, and that's obviously indicative on the thermostat housing where you know, it's all welded up, or the tie rod ends where it was machined down to make it fit, you know, the Peugeot tie rod ends to fit onto this car. So it was a country Uganda car, but then you got to ask the question, like, you know, what year is the car? When did the car actually land? And I call it a 1968 Jaguar 420G. I don't actually know it's a 1968. There is no body stamp on this car that says 1968, 1969, 1970, because ADR plates, Australian Design Rule compliance plates, weren't standardised in the 60s when this car was built. I mean, you could say it's from the 60s because that's when the build dates, you know, 961 to 970. These cars are built between that decade. And you can say that, but what year? No one knows. I looked up a build sheet that gave sequential number orders to when the car was probably built. Like, oh yes, this model range, you know, from this number to this number was built between these two financial years, and it could be this or that, and that's all you can really go off of. Mosquitoes everywhere. That's another challenge of working in a carport. Mosquitoes. They're coming up. They're propping up. But the problem of identifying what year this is, right, is I found a Lucas relay underneath the dashboard that was actually from December 1968, which would mean, like, if they built the component, then the car had to have been built later after the component was built. So it's actually quite possible that this is either a late 1968 or even an early 1969 car. I'm more inclined to call it a 1969 these days, mainly because the number's funny, 69 and 420. You know, the weed number and the sex number. You know, that's pretty hilarious. You know, so a 69 420 would be preferable, but it could just be a 68 420 as well. I believe that this was an import, not a 1968 or a 1969 first year import or whatever. I think this car was actually sold a lot later than what would be indicated. So when taking the front seats out, I was taking apart some wood, taking the wood trim off of the seats and things. which was a 19 bloody Mozzies. Bloody not leaving me alone. They found me. They could sniff the blood. I'm trying to do a nice sit-down presentation video of these fucking bloody Mozzies. God dang. The seats, I was taking apart the seats and I actually found a penny wedged between the seat, the wood frame and the leather, and the penny was a UK new penny from 1971, which indicates to me that someone lost their penny in, well, around 1971 before the car got shipped out here, because there's no UK pennies in Australia. We had our own decimalised currency flavours. So some British guy lost the UK new penny. It's a stamped new penny from 1971 when it got shipped over here. So I believe that this is more of a mid-70s Australian import, probably driven by some bigwig up until like the 80s or the 90s when it got sold to the guy with the Playboy glasses, and then he parked up the car in 1996, and you know, when the registration was last updated, and then for the next 30 years, like it, or 25 years, it just sat, and then he died, and that's it. I believe that's roughly the best history I'm going to have with this car. It was a 1969 build, 1968 build, brought over to Australia in the mid-70s, probably driven by the guy who imported it. In the 90s, some guy bought it when it was cheap, or, you know, lost its value. And then he used it for a couple of years, and then it got parked up. Parked up for years and years. Then, you know, he took some parts off, he lost some parts, he let it just rot, and then he passed on, and it got sold to a junkyard, and I went past the junkyard on the day that it was put out. Weird how that history is so condensed, but you know, it took a lot of clues to figure that thing out. Anyway, I think this was a good rambly sit down video. The first 1080 video that I'm doing instead of standard definition. I'm going to see how that goes. And in the meantime, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and I await you in the next part. Thank you very much for watching.